So we maintain, Chris and I, that every department agency has as its number one AI priority getting AI integrated into major programs. That is where scaled impact is going to occur. And one of, if not the most important element of doing that is acquisition strategy.
This is AI for Leaders by AI Leaders. Practical, to-the-point content helping you drive results with AI. Here's Chris and Frank.
Welcome to the AI Leadership Podcast. I am Frank Strickland. Chris Whitlock is off exercising, one of the wonderful aspects of retirement known as near total schedule flexibility and control. And so he'll be back for the next episode. But for now, I am going to take this episode to focus on what is arguably the principal driver to address the number one priority for AI in every government department and agency. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what we've seen in the wild of late. So in terms of what I've seen in the wild of late, I can't help but think about the release of ChatGPT 4o. O is in omni, as in multimodal voice, audio, vision, as well as similar announcements coming out from Google on Tuesday about Google Gemini advances. And then thirdly is a commercial that Apple launched last week entitled Crush. If you have not seen this commercial, in my view, you have to go watch it. It's a fabulous commercial in my view. It shows a number of artifacts on a platform that represent human creativity, musical instruments, paintings, metronomes, etc. And there's a very large hydraulic press that slowly comes down and crushes all of those things, and there's paint spewing out of the platform, dust and what have you, and then the platform slowly recedes after there's this big dust exhaust blowout, and what you have is the lightest, thinnest iPad, which I believe is AI enabled at some level, and so Apple took a lot of gas for this, so much so the creatives went into, what back in the ELINT days, electronic intelligence days, we would have called high PRF, high pulse repetition frequency. They wigged out. Serious knickers in a knot from the creatives community, so much so that Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, came out and apologized and said, quote, "We missed the mark," unquote. By the way, I'm not saying when he really believes that, because they got a lot of press for that iPad out of this commercial. But you should go check it out for yourself. I think it's a great commercial, but then I'm a tech person, not a creative. But those three announcements and the reactions to them sort of remind us of what Chris and I have talked about before, this spectrum from kind of hysteria or really dark side of the room to hyperbolic reactions, hype about AI and related technology. There is an author, just as an example, that would kind of not be hysterical, but definitely would lean to the negative side, wrote an article called "The Rage Against the Apple Machine." His name is Paul Pastor. I like his writing, his thinking. But this quote struck me in his article. He said, quote, "We lose our connection to the embodied world to our deep loss." In other words, what he's saying is these digital technologies, these artificial intelligence technologies are causing us to lose our connection to the embodied world. And that is a deep loss for us. There is a level at which I resonate with that. There is an element to which I heavily resonate with that. I would just say, to share personally about my life, in my worldview, I am a spirit being that is inhabiting a body. And as a manifestation of that in practical terms, I have recently begun a new habit in my day where the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, I do not have any digital connections, and I won't have any digital connections. So normally, first thing in the morning, grab the phone. Some of you are sleeping with that phone, surveys would say. In fact, surveys would say some of you are sleeping with that phone in your hand. If you're doing that, you need to get help. But I would wake up in the morning, first thing, grab the phone, start scrolling, checking. And normally at night with the iPad, and I'm either off in my Netflix queue, or I'm checking Twitter. I'm seeing what the Nat scores are, et cetera. I might be watching in this particular season some of the NBA playoffs. That's over for me. I am an embodied spirit from my worldview, and I need to be careful about constantly being in the digital realm. So I resonate with some of that, but there are a lot of comments, and you will read them when these major tech rollouts occur, that go to sort of the dark corner of the room, and it's only a matter of time before the machines take over and kill us all. And then there is an infomercial from an investor that I won't name right now, but it came out a couple of weeks ago, caused quite a stir. Some people reached out to Chris, good friends, very smart people concerned, because this investor, who is a well-known investor, he appears on one of the major cable news networks, talked about the fact that AI superintelligence was only 2 to 3 months away. And certainly these rollouts of GPT-4o and Gemini, advanced versions of Gemini, are causing conversations already about how far away are we from what you and I and the AI business would call artificial general intelligence, or AGI, machines that can think and behave like humans across a wide range of domains. And so this investor would kind of represent, not kind of, this investor would represent some of the hyperbolic comments that are out there. Chris and I thought that as we talked about and looked at what's going on right now in the wild, especially just within the past 2 weeks, that a little perspective taking could be helpful from history. And May is a great month to do that. It was 27 years ago, May 11th, in fact, that Garry Kasparov, who was the world's grandmaster chess champion, was defeated in chess by a computer, Deep Blue, built by IBM, 27 years ago. The dialogue that was going on at that time leading up to that match was really no different in tone and tenor than the dialogue that we see today about AI. Newsweek magazine screamed this headline, "The Brain's Last Stand." There was a chess international master who a couple of years later would go on to become the first Black chess grandmaster, Maurice Ashley. He was there observing the match and commenting on it for the news media. And he wrote, quote, "The future of humanity is on the line." And so here we are nearly 3 decades after, and humanity is still ongoing. And probably has a few more years left, just a few. And so Chris and I thought, as these inevitable reactions to these new tech breakthroughs are going to come from both ends of the spectrum, hysteria and hyperbolic, that May is a good opportunity for just some perspective taking. And we would further characterize the perspective we would encourage leaders to have with a few terms: calm, curious humility, the curious word I picked up from one of the government's senior AI leaders. She's a senior AI leader in government. She spoke to a group that I taught a couple of weeks ago. And in her talk, she encouraged these government leaders to remain curious, to keep learning. And she implied humility in the learning journey and being calm in that journey. And why humility? Because this space is changing so fast. There is a lot that we know now, and there is a truck ton that we don't know. That's a technical measurement, truck ton. A lot we don't know. And there are things that we know that we don't fully understand yet. And so we resonate with her encouragement to these government leaders. Be calm, be focused on your mission, be curious, constantly learning, reading, thinking, and be humble about what you know and what you don't know, and be humble about what you know that you don't fully understand. Added to that, Chris and I have a framework that we've encouraged leaders between these two extremes, that you need to be pursuing opportunities. So that would lean toward the positive, because there are tremendous opportunities to transform government and governance with this technology. But also to be mindful of risk and be very clear-eyed about risk, because there are substantial risks. And in the last episode of the podcast that you can get through the show notes, or you can just go to the AI Leadership channel on YouTube, or go to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. The last episode, we talked about a task ladder, because these large language models perform a variety of tasks. We've defined 6 of them, and the risk vary depending on the task. And so we have arrayed the task from the least risky to the greatest risk. And so you can use frameworks like that to not only be mindful of the risk, but to structure your activities in such a way that when you're dealing with lower risk tasks, you still have your eyes open, you still have your hands on the steering wheel, but you're on the Autobahn and you're going, 180 kilometers an hour. You're moving fast. You need to get things done for the mission. With a higher risk task, to continue with the transformation metaphor, there's some tasks that are so risky and some environments that are so risky for the task that you want to have some Jersey barriers up. And you're moving slow and you're staying in one lane, and you're being very, very deliberate. So calm, curious, humility, and then taking a posture that is pursuing opportunities, but is using things like the risk ladder that we provided to mitigate the risks, because there are substantial risks. Last thing, in terms of seeing the wild that go with curious and just learning, Ben Lorica is a master data scientist, but who's also an entrepreneur, investor, director on multiple boards. Just a very fascinating individual, in that he has a strategic leadership perspective, but he's coding models on a weekly basis. And so for that reason, Chris and I really like to follow Ben's podcast, the Data Exchange podcast. And he has a conference once a year. It is one of the more widely, maybe the most widely attended AI conference in the world, and it's called the AI Conference. It's coming up in September. Full disclosure, we have no financial or other connection to Ben other than just being followers of his work and consumers of his work. And so in terms of remaining curious and learning, we would suggest to you the Data Exchange podcast. And if you can make it out to the AI conference, we think it would be well worth your time. You can find more online, obviously, about the conference in September, its agenda, and how to register and attend if you would like. So that's what we've seen that has interested us in the wild of late.
If this content is of use to you, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give this episode a like. If you're listening to this episode on Apple or Spotify, please take time to give us a 5-star rating. And if you have a moment, leave us a quick review. You'll find more resources like this podcast and training courses at our site, aileaders.com. Let us know what you think. We value your feedback.
So we maintain, Chris and I, that every department agency has as its number one AI priority getting AI integrated into major programs. That is where scaled impact is going to occur. And one of, if not the most important element of doing that is acquisition strategy. And so in this segment, I want to talk about acquisition strategy briefly. What is it? Why is it important? And how can you as a leader engage and kind of productively affect it? Lest you think this is straightforward, in a major cabinet level department, an officer rolled in as one of the principal leaders recently, and this would be a department where you would think AI and acquisition strategy would be just excellent. And it was in complete disarray. And so this is a principal element of being successful in getting AI integrated in a department or agency at scale. And it is not naturally done well. So what is acquisition strategy? If you go to FAR 7.105, FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation 7.105, you'll get some further detail. But acquisition strategy, as the name denotes, is a set of objectives, goals and objectives, and the corresponding procurement actions that your department or agency or unit needs to take in order to realize those goals and objectives for AI, for your mission space. Now, why? Why have an acquisition strategy? Because in most departments and agencies, most of the AI activity is going to be acquired from industry. If we think about the full stack AI solution, the stack at a high level, we can think about it like a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is computing. On top of computing is a data layer. On top of a data layer is the modeling, the AI models themselves. And at the pinnacle of the pyramid is user experience. And that is the stack. And I think of security and software running down each side of the pyramid, because security is integrated in everything, and it's all software. Yes, the computing layer has hardware, but the animating technology for AI is software. And so if you think about that stack, again, in the vast majority of the programs in all cabinet departments and all subordinate agencies, most of that is going to get acquired from industry. And so that's going to be done through contracts, through procurements, and procurements need to be planned, and that plan needs to be manifested in an acquisition strategy. So when you're a leader, either on the government or the industry side, let me give you just a handful of questions that you can use to engage in your department and agency around acquisition strategy. And the first is just ask, what is our acquisition strategy? And don't be surprised if you, like this individual I talked about who just rolled in to a major cabinet department that is really dependent on AI for its mission space. Don't be surprised if the answer that you get is not a really concrete and coherent and compelling answer. What is our acquisition strategy? as you begin to look at an acquisition strategy with someone that has created it and you weren't a part of it, ask questions about why the trades were made that were made. So, why is the sequencing the way it is? Why this type of procurement for this activity as opposed to a different type of procurement? Why did we decide to do full and open with these procurements? Why did we decide to do small set aside businesses with these procurements? Why did we decide to use an OTA here and other transactional authority here as opposed to a standard contract there? So ask to understand the logic that is behind the acquisition strategy. Ask about major risk. Every acquisition strategy has major risk. One of the straightforward risks is if you have a contract, maybe that's a platform contract for a full stack AI platform, maybe it's a big services contract for your center of excellence, wide variety of procurements. You have a contract that you are receiving products and services, solutions and services on today, and that contract has an end of life. One of the straightforward risks is getting a replacement contract in place before the end of life or right at the end of life. And as any of you know, my experience is 42 years long now. That's not straightforward, as many contract extensions have experienced. So what are the risks? Funding is another risk. If the acquisition strategy has not considered the reality of a continuing resolution and a CR's effect on new starts, then it's a poor acquisition strategy, because you can pretty much count the probability of a continuing resolution these days, unfortunately, as 100%. It's going to happen. You're not going to get an appropriation on the 1st of October. And if you're working on a continuing resolution, by law, you can't kick off a new start program. Unless you go to the appropriators and get, some special dispensation, which is not easy to do. It's possible, but it's not easy. And so if the acquisition strategy has not accounted for the phasing of funds to include the implications of a continuing resolution in the phasing of funds, then it's not a very well thought out acquisition strategy. Ask about stakeholder involvement. And I would suggest that you ask about 3 types of stakeholders. Most importantly, the users of the AI solutions are being developed. How were the users engaged in developing the acquisition strategy? And again, don't be gobsmacked if the real answer that you get after a bunch of mumbo jumbo is they really haven't been engaged all that much. And so having users engaged is critically important. The formal bureaucratic requirements process, in Chris's, in my view, is not very well suited to building an AI solution where just the basic data science process depends on exploratory, and the modeling development depends on a lot of experimentation and so forth. There is a lot we don't know about AI, and there's a fair amount that we know and we don't fully understand. And so having users involved in the acquisition strategy, in individual procurements, and having that be somewhat of a dynamic and ongoing process, we think is critically important. The second stakeholder group, which depending on your department and agency is sometimes overlooked, is industry. You can, within the federal acquisition regulation, within the FAR, get industry involved in the dialogue, in your thinking, if you're a buyer, prior to you formulating your acquisition strategy. And so given that most of the AI development, the vast, vast majority of it, is being driven by industry, and in this case, commercial industry, if you're a buyer, you would be foolish not to engage industry in a dialogue as you are formulating and refining your acquisition strategy. There is a point in a procurement where the government's going to close the door, the curtain's going to be drawn, and there won't be any more dialogue until the proposals are submitted and evaluated and then debriefed. But up to that point, you have a lot of latitude as a government buyer. And if you have one of those cases where your contracts officers or your attorneys, it doesn't happen often, but if it happens once, in my view, it's too often, and it has happened in my career, that are very restrictive and they don't want to talk to industry. Go and read the FAR for yourself and point them to the FAR. Yes, I can talk with industry, and I'm going to talk with industry. Help me to do that. So industry is a critical stakeholder that you should have dialogue with in formulating your acquisition strategy. And then lastly, your contracts team, your finance team, your legal team, those three teams are essential to implementing your acquisition strategy. The procurements, obviously, the contract is going to be signed by a warranted contracting officer. The money is going to be provided to the contract by a finance officer. A lawyer and attorney in your department agency is going to review the contract. They're going to review the solicitation. So normally today, those three critical teammates in your acquisition strategy are not in your program office. Back in my day, we had within classified reconnaissance programs a system program office, and there was a system program office director or SPO director, and everyone worked for that director. It was great. Tightly integrated, tight collaboration. Typically today, the program, the acquisition program, you will find contracting people that will be outside the program, sometimes outside the immediate agency, finance people in a different stovepipe, legal in a different stovepipe. Whatever your org structure is, those three teammates have got to be highly collaborative with you, and not just when you're thinking about starting a procurement. You need to collaborate with them when you're formulating your acquisition strategy. If you do that, your acquisition strategy has the best chance of being successfully implemented. I mentioned going to the FAR to get some information. Again, it's 7.105. You can also, a couple of resources, you can reach out if you're in government, a couple of government places, and I'm sure there are many more, but the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office's Acquisition Center of Excellence, they will have exemplar acquisition strategies, I believe, that they can share with you. I am dated on that front, but I was an agency CIA senior intelligence service officer there, and I'm pretty sure the Acquisition Center of Excellence still exists there in the NRO, and they have exemplar acquisition strategies. I am certain that within GSA FedSim, that's FEDSIM, FedSim, GSA FedSim, you can find a point of contact for your department or agency. FedSim does a lot of large-scale IT-dependent contracts, to include a lot of contracts that are focused on AI solutions or have AI as a big part of the contract. And FedSim can be a resource that you could pull on to help you with ideas and examples for an acquisition strategy. So those are just some of the resources. But regardless of the department or agency, if you're going to have AI have an impact at scale, you must get AI deployed into major programs, and major programs are going to be dependent on procurements, and procurements should be planned and executed to an acquisition strategy. It gives you the greatest potential for success. The process itself and the definition that I just gave you is straightforward. The magic is in the content of your acquisition strategy, and that is not straightforward. And the friend I alluded to a bit ago ran face first into that in a major department where the acquisition strategy is in disarray. So we would encourage you, whether you're in industry, advising and working with and trying to help the government, and certainly all government officers and departments and agencies, be focused on your acquisition strategy in order to drive AI at scale. So that's a wrap for this episode of the AI Leadership Podcast. Chris will be back with me next time. You can go to our website, aileaders.com, to learn more about the courses. We've trained about 5,000 executives and senior leaders in the past 14, 15 months, give or take. And so we think we have some resources there that can be helpful to you. If you have questions for us, there is an easy way on the website that you can just reach out to us with questions or ideas. And we shall see you back next time on the AI Leadership Podcast. Cheers.